I found lipstick on his shirt, not mine, not a stranger's. Our housekeeper's. He claimed it was an accident. He said she was pregnant. I didn't say a word, until I received the DNA test results. What came next was beyond anything I could have imagined. I rehired her, as my live-in witness for the divorce trial, and his former mistress. Oh, and I kept the house. The lipstick was crimson, a shade I'd never wear. I froze in our laundry room, my fingers trembling as they touched the unmistakable smudge on Jackson's crisp white collar. Ruby red against pristine cotton. The washing machine hummed beside me, oblivious to how my world had just tilted on its axis. I'd seen that exact shade before just yesterday on our housekeeper Anna's full lips as she smiled and cooed at my daughter. My stomach lurched as I sank onto the tile floor, the shirt still clutched in my hands. Just 2 years into our marriage, with our 1-year-old daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, how had we arrived here? Before we continue with Lily's journey of betrayal and ultimate empowerment, I want to invite you to join our community of resilient spirits. If these stories of women reclaiming their power resonate with you, consider subscribing. It costs nothing but means everything as we build this sanctuary of shared experiences together. Now let's dive in. 3 months earlier, life had been picture perfect. Our modest 2-bedroom house in the suburbs of Columbus felt like paradise to me. The kitchen where I'd learned to bake Emma's birthday cake, the living room where Jackson and I would fall asleep watching old movies, the nursery I'd painted myself during my pregnancy, every corner held a memory. Jackson's accounting job at Peterson and Associates provided enough for us to live comfortably. Not wealthy by any means, but we managed. My decision to leave my receptionist position at the dental office had been practical. Childcare costs would have eaten most of my paycheck anyway. Some days I missed adult conversation, but watching Emma discover the world made every sacrifice worthwhile. "You've got it all, Lily," my sister would say during our weekly calls. "The husband, the baby, the house." And I believed her. Jackson brought me coffee every morning before heading to work. He'd kiss Emma's forehead and mine, promising to be home for dinner. We'd built a rhythm, a life that felt secure and warm. The first hairline fracture appeared in February. Jackson missed dinner on a Tuesday, not unusual with tax season approaching. But when he stumbled in at 11 p.m., his excuse about a client emergency felt rehearsed. His cologne smelled different, sharper, as if he'd recently applied it. When I hugged him, he tensed before relaxing into my embrace. "Everything okay?" I asked, searching his face. "Just tired, Lil. This new client is demanding." He kissed my cheek and headed straight for the shower. That night, I stared at the ceiling, listening to his even breathing beside me, wondering why my instincts were suddenly on high alert. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. I dismissed my concerns as new mom paranoia. Then came the text message. Jackson had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he played with Emma in the backyard. The notification lit up the screen. "Miss you already. Same time tomorrow." No name, just a number I didn't recognize. My finger hovered over the message for a long moment before I set the phone down, heart hammering. When I handed it to him later, his eyes flickered with something. Worry? Before he pocketed it without a word. Our budget was stretching thin with Emma's growing needs, so when our neighbor Susan suggested her niece needed part-time housekeeping work, it seemed like the perfect solution. Anna Rodriguez arrived on a Monday morning, all smiles and efficiency. 27, petite, with glossy dark hair and warm brown eyes that crinkled when she laughed. She immediately charmed Emma, who typically wailed at strangers. "You have a beautiful family," Anna told me, glancing at the photos on our mantel. Something in her tone made me pause, but she was already rolling up her sleeves, asking about cleaning supplies. Jackson came home early that day, a rare occurrence that normally would have delighted me. Instead, I noticed how his eyes followed Anna as she gathered her things to leave. How he insisted on walking her to her car since it was getting dark, though the spring sun wouldn't set for hours. "She seems great," he said too casually when he returned. "Good find, Lil." The pattern continued over the next few weeks. Jackson suddenly remembering errands that needed running on Anna's workdays. Coming home for lunch when he knew she'd be there. Small interactions that could be dismissed individually but formed a mosaic of suspicion when pieced together. Our anniversary dinner was scheduled for Thursday. Reservation made weeks in advance at the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. Emma would stay with my mother, giving us a rare night alone. I'd bought a new dress, scheduled a haircut. At 5:30 Jackson called. Client emergency. The Henderson audit is a disaster. I can't get away. My disappointment curdled into something darker when I called his office 10 minutes later, only to have his assistant tell me he'd left at 4. His location app showed him at work, but when I drove past his office building at 7 p.m. his car wasn't there. I circled the parking lot twice to be sure. That night I put Emma to bed and then did something I'd never imagined doing. I searched his car. Nothing unusual in the glove compartment or center console. But wedged under the passenger seat was a receipt from Jackson's Bar and Grill, time-stamped 5:45 p.m. 2 drinks. The same night he was supposedly stuck at work. When he came home at 10:30 I pretended to be asleep. He didn't try to wake me. The next morning, Anna arrived to find me red-eyed from a sleepless night. She worked quietly, her expression softer than usual, almost sympathetic. Did she know something I didn't? Then came today, laundry day. The basket of Jackson's work shirts. The routine task of checking pockets before washing. And there it was, the lipstick stain that couldn't be explained away by any business meeting. The exact shade I'd seen on Anna's lips yesterday as she polished our silverware, humming softly to herself. Now sitting on the cold laundry room floor, I held the evidence of betrayal between trembling fingers. The home I'd built, the life I'd chosen, the family I cherished. It was all balanced on the edge of a knife. And I had to decide whether to grasp the blade or let everything fall. I waited 3 hours with that shirt laid out on the kitchen table, the crimson smudge facing upward like an accusation. Emma napped peacefully upstairs, unaware that her mother was rehearsing confrontation scenarios in her mind. When Jackson's key turned in the lock at 6:15, my hands were steady, but my heart hammered against my ribs. "Hey Lil," he called out, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness I'd come to recognize. "Something smells good." The lasagna I'd prepared earlier sat forgotten in the oven. I remained silent as his footsteps approached the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, his smile faltering when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" His eyes followed mine to the shirt on the table. Something flickered across his face, panic quickly masked with confusion. "I was doing laundry," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Found something interesting." Jackson stepped closer, examining the lipstick stain with exaggerated surprise. "Huh. That's weird." "Is it?" I leaned forward. "Because it looks exactly like the shade Anna wears." The transformation was immediate, concern morphing to defensive anger. "Are you serious right now? You think I'm involved with our housekeeper?" His indignation was almost convincing. "Almost. I'm not accusing, Jackson. I'm asking." He ran a hand through his hair, his nervous tell since college. "This is ridiculous. Anna bumped into me last Tuesday when we were both in the hallway. She was carrying a stack of your sweaters and I grabbed her arm to steady her. That's probably when it happened." The explanation was detailed, specific, too perfect. My stomach sank. "She wasn't here Tuesday. She comes Mondays and Thursdays." A flicker of panic crossed his features before he recovered. "Right, Thursday then. I'm under a lot of pressure at work, Lily." Days blurred together. The conversation spiraled into a textbook case of gaslighting. Jackson expressed hurt that I doubt him, reminded me of all he sacrificed for our family, suggested my isolation at home was making me paranoid. By the time Emma woke crying, I'd almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Almost. Monday came but Anna didn't. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When she didn't show Thursday either, I called our neighbor Susan. "Haven't heard from her," Susan said. "Family emergency maybe? She's usually so reliable." 2 weeks passed. Anna vanished completely. No calls, no explanation. Jackson never mentioned her absence, which spoke volumes. The tension in our house thickened, conversations reduced to logistical exchanges about Emma's schedule and household needs. Then came the day at Valley Medical Center. Emma had developed an ear infection, and I sat in the pediatric waiting room, bouncing her feverish body gently on my lap. A familiar figure emerged from the adjacent obstetrics department, moving slowly, one hand resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly. "Anna." Our eyes locked across the waiting room. Her face drained of color. Before I could move, she hurried toward the exit, but not before I noticed the changes. The fuller face, the tentative way she walked. I knew those signs intimately from my own pregnancy. It took 3 days to track her down. She'd moved from her apartment, but Susan reluctantly provided her mother's address after I invented a story about Anna forgetting important tax documents at our house. The modest duplex was across town, in a neighborhood where porches sagged and chain-link fences protected patchy lawns. Anna agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When she arrived, her pregnancy was more noticeable in her fitted t-shirt. She ordered herbal tea with trembling hands and couldn't meet my eyes. "How far along?" I asked after painfully awkward small talk. "For months," she whispered. The timeline aligned perfectly with her disappearance. "And the father?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I think you already know." The confirmation shouldn't have hurt. I'd suspected it for weeks, but hearing it spoken aloud was like having my ribcage pried open. "Tell me everything," I managed to say. Her story unfolded between sobs. Jackson's compliments turning to flirtation. Brushing against her while she worked. Offering her rides when her car broke down. The affair had lasted 2 months before guilt consumed her. "He said your marriage was already over," she said. "That you slept in separate bedrooms, that you stayed together just for Emma." She twisted a paper napkin between her fingers. "When I told him about the baby, he said he'd take care of it. Money for, you know. But I couldn't. And now he blocks my calls. Says if I tell you, he'll make sure I lose custody when the baby comes." Her voice hardened. "I have no money for a lawyer. No family except my mother. He knows that." I stared at her swollen belly, thinking of the child growing within, Emma's half-sibling. Anger and compassion warred inside me. "I'm sorry," Anna whispered. "I know that means nothing." Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt oddly calm. The weeks of uncertainty had been torture. Knowledge, even painful knowledge, brought clarity. I drove to the park and sat watching children play, my mind racing through options. That night, after tucking Emma into her crib, I stood in our bedroom doorway watching Jackson pretend to read financial reports. This man who shared my bed, my home, my life. I suddenly saw him as a stranger. "Anna's pregnant," I said, my voice flat. The report slipped from his fingers. "What?" "Don't." I raised my hand. "Just don't." His denials died on his lips as he registered my expression. "Lily, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." I turned away. "I'm sleeping in the guest room." Later, in the darkness of that unfamiliar bed, I made a vow to myself. There would be no tearful confrontations, no begging for explanations I already understood. Jackson had underestimated me, believing my quiet nature meant weakness. His mistake. I needed evidence. Irrefutable proof that even Jackson couldn't charm his way around. I needed time to secure Emma's future. And most importantly, I needed a plan for what came next. As moonlight spilled across the guest room floor, I opened my laptop and began to research DNA testing, family law, and how to document infidelity. This was no longer about saving my marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity and protecting what was mine. Living with a man you no longer trust is an exhausting performance. Each morning I woke beside Jackson, my body rigid to avoid accidental contact. I packed his lunches with the same care as before. I maintained dinner conversations about Emma's development while a chasm widened between us. He mistook my calm for forgiveness or perhaps denial, never suspecting that beneath my placid expression, I was building a case. My laptop browser history filled with searches on divorce laws in our state, hidden camera options and voice-activated recorders. I created a new email account from the library computer and opened a separate bank account with the modest inheritance my grandmother had left me, just enough for a retainer fee when the time came. The old Lily might have confronted Jackson immediately, tears streaming down her face, begging for explanations. That woman was gone. "You seem distant lately," Jackson commented one evening as we loaded the dishwasher side by side. His hand brushed against mine, a deliberate gesture that once would have made my heart flutter. "Just tired," I replied, the same excuse he'd offered countless times. "Emma's teething again." He nodded, seemingly relieved I wasn't pushing for deeper conversation. The dance continued. 2 strangers sharing a mortgage, a child, a bed we no longer truly occupied together. My first piece of concrete evidence came from his cell phone records. As the account holder, accessing them was simple. Countless calls to Anna's number stopped abruptly around the time of our confrontation, but late-night texts to her continued from a different number. A prepaid phone I later found hidden in his golf bag. I photographed everything, saved screenshots, and documented dates and times in a notebook I kept locked in my glove compartment. Then came financial trails. Small withdrawals from our joint checking account. $200 here, $300 there. Nothing that would raise immediate alarm but added up to thousands over 3 months. The timing aligned perfectly with Anna's pregnancy timeline. I printed bank statements, highlighting each withdrawal, connecting dates to the cell phone records. While maintaining this facade of normalcy, I watched Emma grow, speaking her first words, taking wobbly steps across our living room. Sometimes the weight of deception made it hard to breathe. During those moments, I'd take Emma to the park, watching her delight in simple pleasures, reminding myself why this methodical approach mattered. She deserved stability and I deserved truth. The birth announcement appeared on a mutual friend's social media feed one Tuesday morning in October. A congratulatory post tagging Anna's profile with a hospital photo. A tiny newborn with a shock of dark hair swaddled in blue. "Welcome to the world, little Lucas." The timestamp showed he had arrived 2 days earlier. 7 pounds 6 ounces. Born 3 weeks early but healthy. My coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile. Emma startled in her high chair, but I barely registered her surprised cry. The baby's face, even scrunched and new, carried unmistakable echoes of my husband's features. The same slightly pointed chin, the same ear shape. Social media provided what months of careful investigation could not: visual evidence. DNA testing proved more complicated than internet searches suggested. I needed samples from both Jackson and the baby without either knowing. For Jackson, I collected a toothbrush he'd recently replaced. For the baby, opportunity presented itself when Susan mentioned visiting Anna in the hospital. I crafted a congratulatory card with a small stuffed animal, asking Susan to deliver it. "Could you maybe get a photo of Anna with the gift? Just so she knows it's from us," I suggested casually. Susan returned with not only photos but also the hospital bracelet that had fallen off the baby, complete with traces of newborn skin cells. The testing company required only a small sample and promised results within 2 weeks. Those 14 days stretched like years. I functioned on autopilot, working, mothering, pretending. Jackson seemed to sense something shifting, bringing home flowers, suggesting date nights. Each gesture felt like another betrayal. The envelope arrived on a Thursday while Jackson was at work. My hands trembled so severely I could barely open it. The clinical language and percentages blurred before my eyes, but the conclusion stood out in stark relief. 99.9998% probability of paternity. Scientific confirmation of what my heart already knew. That afternoon, I called the law offices of Williams and Associates, recommended by a mommy group friend who'd recently divorced. Sarah Williams, a razor-sharp attorney in her 50s, agreed to see me the following day. "Bring everything you've documented," she instructed over the phone. "And Lily? Stop using joint accounts for anything related to this. He needs to believe everything is normal until we're ready to move." Her office smelled of leather and lemon polish, understated luxury that spoke of success. I spread my evidence across her desk. Phone records, bank statements, the DNA test results, photographs of text messages. "You've been thorough," Sarah said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Most clients come to me with suspicions but no proof." "What happens now?" I asked. She outlined options with brutal clarity: immediate confrontation and separation, or strategic planning to secure better terms. When she detailed potential custody arrangements, my resolve faltered for the first time. "He's still Emma's father," I whispered. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "And that relationship will continue. But understanding his character matters for establishing boundaries." I left her office with a strange sense of liberation. Knowledge and strategy had transformed me from victim to architect of my own future. Now I needed one final piece to complete the puzzle: Anna's testimony. That night, after Emma was asleep and Jackson engrossed in a basketball game, I made the call from my new prepaid phone. Anna answered on the third ring, her voice wary when I identified myself. "I'm not calling to fight," I assured her, keeping my tone steady despite the emotion churning beneath. "I need your help and I think you need mine. I don't understand." I have proof of everything, Anna. The affair, the payments, the baby's paternity. Silence stretched between us. I heard a soft infant cry in the background. What do you want from me? Her voice trembled. I'm filing for divorce, I said the first time I'd spoken those words aloud. And I have a proposition that might help us both. As I outlined my plan, her return to our home as a live-in housekeeper, providing first-hand testimony when needed, I heard her sharp intake of breath. He'll never allow it. He won't have a choice, I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Not if he wants to avoid a very public scandal at his firm. By the time we ended the call, the foundations of my next move were firmly in place. The woman who had once been my rival would become my greatest ally in the battle ahead. The evidence was irrefutable, my resolve unshakable. The facade I'd maintained was about to crumble, revealing a strength neither Jackson nor I had recognized before. 3 days after our phone call, Anna stood on our doorstep, her eyes downcast, a baby carrier clutched in one hand and a small suitcase in the other. Behind her, a taxi pulled away, leaving her no escape route. Little Lucas was asleep, his dark lashes resting against plump cheeks, blissfully unaware of the storm surrounding his existence. Thank you for coming, I said, loud enough for our neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who was coincidentally watering her already soaked petunias, to hear. I know how hard this must be after everything you've been through, but we're so glad you felt comfortable accepting our offer to help. Anna caught on quickly, nodding. It's very generous of you, Mrs. Carter. I don't know what Lucas and I would have done otherwise. The guest room had been transformed into a makeshift nursery adjacent to Anna's sleeping area. I'd purchased a crib, changing table, and basic supplies, partly for appearances, partly because seeing the innocent baby stirred something protective in me despite the circumstances. Emma, now wobbling confidently on her feet, regarded the newcomers with wide-eyed curiosity. Jackson will be home around 6, I said, helping Anna unpack. I've told him you needed emergency housing after a pipe burst in your apartment. That you'll be helping with both children in exchange for room and board. Her hands trembled as she arranged tiny onesies in the drawer I'd emptied for her. He'll know I would never come back here unless you had no choice, I finished. Which is essentially true. The look that passed between us acknowledged our strange alliance, 2 women navigating the aftermath of one man's betrayal. Neither friends nor enemies, but something more complicated. When Jackson's car pulled into the driveway that evening, I was feeding Emma in her high chair. The sound of his key in the lock, once comforting, now triggered an instinctive tension. I heard his footsteps halt abruptly in the hallway as he spotted the unfamiliar diaper bag and infant car seat. Lily. His voice carried a note of confusion that quickly morphed into panic when Anna emerged from the kitchen with a bottle for Lucas. The color drained from his face. What is this? Anna's apartment flooded, I explained calmly, wiping pureed carrots from Emma's chin. She needed a place to stay, and we need help with Emma now that I'm applying for teaching positions again. Win-win. Jackson's eyes darted between us, searching for some indication of what had been said, what was known. Finding none, he retreated to our bedroom without dinner, claiming a headache. That night, the tiny voice-activated recorders I'd placed throughout the house captured his first desperate attempt to corner Anna in the hallway while I bathed Emma. Are you insane? His whisper was harsh, frantic. What did you tell her? Nothing, Anna replied, her voice steadier than I would have expected. She offered help when no one else would. My family disowned me, Jackson. You stopped answering my calls. You need to leave. Tomorrow. I'll give you money, set you up somewhere else. And go where? With what job? With what support for your son? The recorder captured his sharp intake of breath. Keep your voice down. That's not. We don't know for sure. I know for sure, Anna said. And deep down so do you. The days that followed established a new normal of excruciating tension. Jackson left early for work and returned late. When home, he maintained physical distance from Anna while watching her every move. I played my role perfectly. The oblivious wife focused on childcare and job applications, seemingly blind to the charged atmosphere. Meanwhile, the recorders collected damning evidence. Jackson's late-night offers of money if Anna would leave, his explicit acknowledgement of their affair, his threats about custody. Each night, I downloaded the recordings, categorizing them meticulously according to Sarah's instructions. Each morning I steeled myself to continue the performance. The true test came during the neighborhood Memorial Day barbecue. Our annual tradition couldn't be canceled without raising questions, so our backyard filled with neighbors bearing potato salad and curious glances at our unusual household arrangement. "So generous of you too," Susan commented, eyeing Anna as she moved between groups with Lucas strapped to her chest. "Taking in your housekeeper and her baby during her time of need." "It's temporary," Jackson said too quickly, his knuckles white around his beer bottle. "Actually," I interjected with a bright smile, "we're discussing a more permanent arrangement. Anna's been such a blessing with Emma, and the babies are already bonding beautifully. Almost like siblings." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson's face contorted momentarily before he excused himself to check the grill. From across the yard I caught Anna's gaze. A silent acknowledgement passed between us. The precarious balance was shifting. Later that evening, as guests departed, Jackson cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low and dangerous. "What game are you playing, Lily?" For weeks I'd maintained perfect composure. But something about his entitled anger triggered a response I couldn't suppress. "No games, Jackson. Just hospitality to your son and his mother." His face paled, then flushed dark red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I leaned closer. "Lucas has your chin. Your ears. But most notably, he has your DNA." Jackson stepped back as if I'd struck him. "You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted, my voice deadly calm. "Just as I had the right to check phone records, bank statements, to record your conversations in my home." Pure panic flashed across his features. For the first time he saw not the accommodating wife he'd taken for granted, but a woman who had methodically unraveled his deceptions. "Lily, listen, it was a mistake. A momentary weakness. It didn't mean anything." "Save it," I said, raising my hand. "I've heard all your explanations to Anna. The recordings are quite thorough." He lunged for my phone on the counter, but I was quicker, sliding it into my pocket. "Copies exist in multiple locations. My attorney has everything." "Attorney?" His whisper carried genuine fear now. "Sarah Williams. Perhaps you've heard of her? She handled the Dalton divorce last year. The husband lost everything, as I recall." The color drained from his face. "You can't do this. Think about Emma." "I am thinking about Emma. About the kind of father she deserves, the kind of marriage I deserve." I walked away then, leaving him standing in our kitchen, surrounded by remnants of the party, discarded plates, half-empty cups, crumbs of a life that was crumbling beneath his feet. Upstairs I passed the guest room door, hearing Anna's soft lullaby to Lucas. Two innocents caught in this web of betrayal. That night, sleep eluded me. The confrontation had been necessary, cathartic even, but it marked the point of no return. Whatever happened next would reshape all our lives permanently. As dawn broke, I heard Jackson moving through the house, gathering work items. The front door closed with quiet finality. My phone pinged with a text message. "Coming to the office today. We need to discuss next steps." Sarah's professional tone was oddly comforting amidst the emotional chaos. The machinery of divorce was now in motion, grinding forward with unstoppable momentum. The house of lies we'd built was finally collapsing, but from its ruins I would salvage what mattered most. The courthouse loomed before me, a stark limestone edifice that had witnessed countless broken promises and fragmented families. My modest navy dress felt like armor as I clutched my leather portfolio containing every shred of evidence we'd gathered over the past 3 months. Sarah walked beside me, her heels clicking confidently on the marble steps. "Remember what we discussed," she murmured as we approached the courtroom doors. "Stay calm, speak clearly, and don't let him provoke an emotional response. Judge Harrington appreciates composure." Inside, the polished wood and formal atmosphere carried an almost sacred quality, though what was being dissolved here was anything but holy. Jackson and his attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit whose reputation for aggressive tactics preceded him, were already seated at the opposing table. Our eyes met briefly across the room. I'd expected anger or perhaps contrition, but what I saw instead was calculation. Even now, Jackson was strategizing, planning his next move. That cold assessment confirmed I'd made the right decision. The proceedings began with formal introductions and preliminary statements. Jackson's attorney painted him as a devoted father blindsided by an unreasonable wife who had entrapped his client by moving his former mistress into their home. The audacity of this narrative might have devastated me months ago, but now it merely strengthened my resolve. When it was my turn to testify, I approached the witness stand with steady steps. The oath felt significant, a promise to truth after months of living with lies. Sarah guided me through prepared questions about our marriage, Jackson's betrayal, and the documented evidence. "And why did you invite Ms. Rodriguez to live in your home?" Sarah asked, addressing the element of the case that had raised the most eyebrows. I took a measured breath. I recognized that Anna was also a victim of my husband's manipulation. She was young, isolated, and pregnant with his child, a child he was pressuring her to terminate. I couldn't stand by and watch another woman be discarded by the same man who had broken promises to me. The gallery murmured. Judge Harrington, a woman in her 60s with penetrating eyes and a reputation for fairness, leaned forward slightly. "Wouldn't most women in your position want distance from such a painful reminder?" she asked. "Initially, yes. But this wasn't about my comfort, it was about doing what was right. Anna needed safe housing for herself and her baby. My daughter deserved to know her half-brother. And I needed to ensure that the pattern of manipulation ended with me." During cross-examination, Jackson's attorney tried to portray me as calculating and vindictive. He suggested I'd coerced Anna into false testimony, that I'd manufactured evidence. His voice dripped with condescension as he questioned my motives. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Carter, that you set this entire scenario up to ensure maximum financial gain from this divorce?" I met his gaze steadily. "If financial gain were my priority, I would have accepted the settlement offer your client proposed last month, the one that would have given me a substantial payout in exchange for my silence about his affair and the child that resulted from it." The attorney's expression flickered. This was clearly news to him. Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his seat as I continued. "I declined that offer because this isn't about money. It's about creating a stable environment for both children and ensuring that Jackson takes responsibility for his actions and his offspring." When Anna took the stand the following day, her hands trembled visibly. Lucas was being watched by my mother in the courthouse childcare center along with Emma. Despite her nervousness, Anna's testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She detailed Jackson's pursuit of her despite knowing she was vulnerable, new to the country, struggling financially and isolated socially. She described his promises and subsequent abandonment when she refused to terminate her pregnancy. "He told me he would destroy me if I told his wife," she said quietly. "That no one would believe me over him, that he could have me deported." Her voice strengthened. "But Mrs. Carter, Lily, she believed me. She offered help when he offered only threats." Jackson's face darkened with each word. When his turn came to testify, he attempted to portray himself as the victim of circumstance, a hard-working husband whose momentary lapse in judgment was being used against him. But the recordings we'd submitted to evidence undermined every claim. His own words, captured in our home, revealed threats, admissions, and calculated deceptions. By the third day of proceedings, the atmosphere had shifted perceptibly. Judge Harrington's questions became more pointed toward Jackson's attorney, her skepticism of his arguments more apparent. When she called for closing statements, Sarah delivered ours with quiet confidence, focusing not on punishing Jackson but on establishing stability for both children. As we awaited the judge's ruling, the courtroom fell silent. I felt strangely detached, as if watching a movie about someone else's life. Judge Harrington adjusted her glasses, reviewing her notes one final time before looking up. "In matters of divorce with children involved, this court's primary concern is always the welfare of the minors," she began. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony in this case, I find that the maternal home provides the most stable environment for the minor child, Emma Carter." She continued through her ruling methodically. "Primary physical custody awarded to me, generous but supervised visitation for Jackson, mandatory child support for both children." When she addressed the division of property, her voice took on a firmer tone. "Regarding the family home on Maple Street, I am granting sole ownership to Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter's attempt to shield assets by transferring funds to separate accounts prior to filing demonstrates bad faith negotiation. Furthermore, maintaining stability of housing for the minor child takes precedence." The finality of the gavel's strike echoed through the courtroom. Just like that, it was over. 2 years of marriage dissolved in a 3-day hearing. I felt no triumph, only relief, and a strange emptiness where anger had resided for so long. Outside the courthouse, Jackson attempted one final confrontation, approaching as I waited for Sarah to bring the car around. "You've ruined everything," he hissed, his composure finally cracking. "You turned her against me. You took my home." I studied his face, once so beloved, now as strangers. "No, Jackson. You did that yourself. The difference is, I refuse to be ruined alongside you." 6 months later, our yellow house on Maple Street had transformed. The spare bedroom had become Anna's permanent space, redecorated with her few treasured possessions. The backyard now featured 2 swings, one for Emma and a smaller one for Lucas, who was beginning to show Jackson's smile despite having never known his father's presence. Anna had enrolled in community college nursing classes, watching the children on alternating schedules with me as I returned to teaching part-time. We weren't friends in the traditional sense, our connection born of shared trauma rather than natural affinity, but we developed a mutual respect that sometimes resembled friendship. "Do you regret it?" she asked one evening as we sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "Letting me stay? Keeping the house instead of starting fresh somewhere else?" I considered the question, watching our children play on the lawn that had witnessed both the best and worst moments of my adult life. "No," I said finally. "This house was never the problem. It was the lies inside it. Now they're gone and we've filled it with something better." The laughter of our children, half-siblings united by circumstance rather than design, drifted through the evening air. Not the ending I'd once imagined, certainly not a perfect one, but authentic and hard one. In reclaiming what was mine, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed: strength, resilience, and the capacity for forgiveness that didn't require forgetting. The sun set on our unconventional family, casting long shadows across the lawn of the house that now truly belonged to me, not just in legal terms, but in the deeper sense of finally being exactly where I was meant to be. If Lily's journey from heartbreak to strength touched your heart today, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. Your comments about similar experiences or words of encouragement for others mean the world to this community. We're all in this together, finding our strength one story at a time.